To my son, if you ever doubt whether the ocean loves you back, remember that it can test your will in ways you'd never imagine. I'm writing this because I need you to know that sometimes we survive not because we're strong, but because life wants to show us who we really are. You won't believe how this story ends. It's a twist that will shake even the hardest hearts, and I promise it'll leave you questioning what true survival really means. The sun was just cracking over the horizon when I launched my boat off Cape Canaveral, painting the waves in streaks of orange and pink, as if the ocean was on fire. The salt air felt sharp and clean in my lungs, a crispness that always made me feel invincible, like nothing bad could ever find me out here. The water lay glassy and calm, with gentle ripples brushing the hull as I steered toward my usual reef, humming an old fisherman's tune under my breath. Gulls circled overhead, crying in high, slicing calls, sometimes dropping low enough that their wings nearly touched the rods lined up along the boat. It was one of those mornings that made you believe the sea was a friend, whispering secrets only you could hear, lulling you into thinking you were safe. I baited my hooks with fresh mullet, feeling the slippery flesh in my fingers, flicking tiny scales that sparkled like stars in the dawn light. The engine idled quietly as I drifted over the reef, watching schools of baitfish dart beneath the surface, flashing silver just below the chop. I felt completely at home, wrapped in the soft slap of water against fiberglass, the smell of brine and sun-baked salt. A light breeze blew across my arms, cool but already hinting at the heat to come, and I thought of my son waiting for me at home, excited for the fish I'd promised to bring. I never imagined the ocean could turn on me so suddenly, like a creature with a hidden temper. About an hour in, I noticed how the water seemed darker, as though a storm cloud was floating just beneath the surface, coiling in slow spirals. My lines went still, the sea eerily silent except for the distant churn of swells breaking on the shallows. A feeling crept over me, that primal chill between my shoulder blades, a sense that something was watching me from the deep. The breeze dropped, leaving the world hushed and heavy, and even the gulls seemed to vanish, as if they knew better than to linger. My heart began to hammer in my chest, beating out a rhythm older than fear itself. I spotted a fin once, slicing briefly through a swell about 30 feet off my stern, so fast I almost doubted I'd seen it. It cut the surface like a blade and disappeared as quickly as it had come, leaving a faint V-wake rippling across the calm. I told myself it was probably just a dolphin, trying to calm the sudden panic twisting in my gut, but the silence was too thick, the water too still. A strange, oily smell drifted on the breeze, not quite fish, not quite blood, but something in between that made my stomach tighten. I felt like a man balanced on the thin edge of something I couldn't name, staring into a place that didn't want me looking back. That was when my starboard line jerked so hard it nearly pulled the rod overboard, and a monstrous shape erupted from below, slamming the side of my boat with a force that rattled the hull. I dropped my pliers and stumbled, grabbing for the gunwale as the water exploded in white foam and thrashing fins. Time seemed to slow as I stared into the froth, catching glimpses of grey muscle and rows of teeth that seemed impossibly huge. A deep, resonant thump echoed through the boat as the creature circled around for another pass, and in that instant I knew I was alone out here, and that something had decided it wanted me. The shark struck again before I could even think, its bulk surging against the hull, rattling the cooler loose and sending tackle boxes flying across the deck in a rain of hooks and lures. Water sprayed over me in cold sheets as I grabbed the rail, struggling to keep my footing, my heart beating so hard I thought it might tear open my ribs. I glimpsed the creature fully this time, a massive bull shark, thick as a barrel, with tiny black eyes and skin mottled with scars that caught the sunlight in pale flashes. Its dorsal fin carved the water like a sail, coming closer and closer until it slammed into the side again, jaws snapping shut with a sound like a steel trap. The force of it knocked me backward, my shoulder cracking against the motor housing, pain exploding down my arm as my vision blurred around the edges. Salt water stung my eyes, filling my mouth with a briny burn as I gasped for breath, tasting the sharp tang of blood that I couldn't tell was mine or the shark's. I screamed for help, though I knew no one could hear me out here, my voice swallowed by the slap of waves and the shark's heavy thrashing. The shark circled tight, faster each time, as if sizing me up, testing how much fight I had left, while I fumbled for anything I could use as a weapon. My hands found the gaff hook leaning in the rod holder, its steel point glinting wetly, and I snatched it up with shaking fingers slick with seawater and sweat. The shark rushed in again, bumping the hull so hard I fell to one knee, scraping skin off my shin on the non-skid deck, pain screaming up my leg. The boat rocked violently, water pouring over the side, and I thought the damn thing might capsize me right then and there. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, but there was nowhere to run, only the endless flat ocean stretching in all directions. I swung the gaff in a wild arc as the shark's head rose out of the water, jaws opening so wide I could see the pink flesh inside, ridged and lined with teeth like a saw blade. It lunged, jaws clamping onto the transom, dragging the stern lower into the water. And for a terrifying instant, I was face to face with those black, lifeless eyes. Foam churned around us, splashing my chest and soaking my clothes as I stabbed downward, the gaff point punching into the shark's skin just behind its eye. The shark thrashed violently, throwing its massive head side to side, and the gaff ripped from my hands, nearly pulling me over the side along with it. I scrambled backward, my breath tearing in ragged sobs, my arms trembling so hard I could barely hold myself upright. Blood fanned out in red ribbons beneath the boat, swirling into delicate patterns before dissolving into the blue. For a few seconds, I thought maybe the shark would retreat, wounded and angry but satisfied with blood. But it only seemed more frenzied, its tail slamming against the hull, the vibration carrying up through my feet into my bones. It disappeared beneath the boat, leaving a spreading pool of red, and I spun in circles, searching for it, the gaff hook lost somewhere in the scupper water sloshing across the deck. I could hear my own breathing, ragged and shallow, louder than the slap of the waves, my body shaking so violently my teeth chattered. Then the shark surged upward again, bursting halfway out of the water, jaws snapping inches from my leg, so close I felt the cold wind of its movement against my skin. A scream tore from my throat, high and thin, a sound I didn't even recognize as my own. It grabbed my leg in a lightning-fast snap, its teeth driving into my calf with a pain so blinding I couldn't even draw breath, only convulse as white fire exploded through my body. The shark yanked backward, pulling me toward the rail, my hands scrabbling for anything to hold onto as I felt skin and muscle tearing like wet fabric. I could feel each serrated tooth sawing through flesh and into bone, a sickening grind that made my vision go black around the edges. I punched at its snout, screaming wordless curses, my fists connecting with rubbery hide, slick with seawater and blood. For a moment the shark didn't let go, shaking its head side to side, and the sound of ripping flesh echoed in my skull like a gunshot. I thought that was the moment I'd die, swallowed by the sea, my son left fatherless, my life ending in a whirl of blood and salt. Suddenly the shark released me, perhaps spooked by the thrashing of the boat or the blood flooding the water, and vanished beneath the surface in a swirl of foam. I collapsed to the deck, clutching my shredded leg, the world spinning above me in dizzying circles of sky and gulls and sun. Blood poured between my fingers in warm pulses, spreading slick and red across the fiberglass, pooling under my knees. My breath came in gasps, each one tasting of salt and copper, my body shivering uncontrollably as shock clawed up my spine. I stared at the water, expecting the shark to lunge back any second, imagining its silhouette rising up from the deep like a nightmare. My entire body felt weightless and distant, as if my soul was already hovering above me, deciding whether to stay or drift away. That was when everything went grey. The sunlight turned to shadow, and I passed out cold, leaving my boat alone in the bloody churn of the Atlantic. I woke up in a white room that smelled like antiseptic and sea salt, my ears filled with the steady beep of a monitor. And for a long time, I couldn't figure out if I was alive or if this was some in-between place where the ocean had left me. My leg felt like it was on fire, each throb sending electric shocks up my spine, and when I tried to move, pain slammed into me so hard I let out a low, animal groan. Tubes snaked out of my arms, dripping clear fluids, while the sheets were stiff and scratchy against my skin, soaked with sweat from fever that rolled through me in waves. I turned my head slowly, spotting a plastic curtain drawn halfway around my bed, shadows moving on the other side like shapes swimming in a murky tide pool. My mouth was dry as sand, my tongue thick and useless, and for a while I could only lie there, staring at the ceiling tiles and trying to remember my own name. A nurse finally came in, small and serious, her eyes tired but kind, explaining in a gentle voice that they'd airlifted me off the boat after a passing charter captain found me drifting and half-conscious. She said the Coast Guard had seen the blood trail from the sky, a vivid red spiral blooming in the blue, and that my leg was in bad shape, but they'd managed to save it. I tried to speak, but could only croak out a single question, my throat raw. Did it take my leg? She hesitated just long enough for terror to claw up my chest, then shook her head, though her face looked tight, as if she were hiding the truth. I lifted the sheet with shaking fingers and saw the thick bandages wrapped around my calf, stained pink and brown. And for a few seconds, the room tilted like the deck of my boat. I thought about how close I'd come to dying, how one more second in that shark's jaws might have meant bleeding out alone beneath the Florida sun. The physical pain was one thing, but the real wound came later, creeping into the edges of my mind like seawater, seeping into a crack in the hull. At night I'd jerk awake screaming, convinced the shark was still there, circling my bed, its fins slicing through invisible waves beneath the hospital floor. I kept hearing the snap of its teeth, the hollow thump of it hitting the boat, and the taste of blood filled my mouth even in my dreams. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt its cold, wet skin against my fist, the bone-deep crunch of its teeth in my leg, the absolute certainty that I was about to vanish under the waves. Nurses came running whenever my monitors spiked, trying to calm me, but the terror clung to me like salt to skin, impossible to wash away. People kept telling me how lucky I was to survive, but all I could think was why it let me go. That question turned over and over in my mind like driftwood tumbling in the surf. Why didn't it finish me off? Did it lose interest? Did I wound it enough to make it retreat? Or was it something deeper, some instinct in the animal that told it I wasn't worth killing, or that it had made its point? I replayed the moment again and again, analyzing the look in its dark eyes, searching for any flicker of intent, anything that would explain why I was here and not lying at the bottom of the sea. Sometimes I convinced myself the shark had shown me mercy. Other times, I believed it simply got distracted by the blood in the water or sensed bigger prey nearby. Each possibility left me rattled and hollow because nothing I came up with made me feel safe ever again. Even awake, I'd catch shadows moving under my hospital bed, half expecting a dorsal fin to rise from the linoleum. A week after surgery, I was wheeled outside for the first time. The Florida sun so bright it made me squint and tear up, and for a moment I thought I smelled salt water on the breeze. The ocean seemed to glitter beyond the hospital parking lot, an endless shimmer of blue that both called to me and filled me with a crawling dread. I closed my eyes and heard gulls crying overhead, felt the heat on my arms, and a part of me wanted to stand up and run straight back to the shore to prove I wasn't afraid. But another part stayed frozen, replaying the shark's eyes, its bulk, the way it had tasted my blood. A single tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it, and the nurse gently squeezed my shoulder, whispering that surviving meant I'd already won. But I didn't feel like a winner. I felt like a man whose life had been cleaved open, staring into a darkness I'd never known existed. It's been 6 months since the attack, and I still wake up some nights to the phantom feel of teeth sinking into my flesh. a ghostly ache that tightens around my calf like iron bands. The scars are ragged and pink, winding around my leg in raised ridges that look like pale coral reefs. And sometimes when I touch them, I swear I can feel the shark's pulse in my fingertips. I've learned to walk again, though there's a limp I can't quite shake, and the doctors say I might always have numbness in parts of my leg where nerves were shredded. People stare when I wear shorts, eyes dropping to the scars before darting away like startled fish, and part of me wants to tell them the story, to make them see what the ocean gave and took from me. Other days, I wish they'd just look me in the eye, and not at the place where the shark tried to tear me open. My son asks if the shark was a monster, and I tell him no, that monsters know nothing of malice, they only follow the current of their own nature. I've sold my boat, though some days I miss the hum of the outboard and the slap of waves against the hull, the way the sea always smelled like possibility. Instead, I've thrown myself into speaking at marine conservation events, telling my story to anyone who'll listen, hoping maybe my voice can help people understand sharks aren't villains, but creatures born from millions of years of perfect design. Still, it's not easy standing under bright stage lights, my palms sweating, as I talk about blood and panic and the way death felt so close I could smell its breath. Sometimes I catch the crowd flinching when I describe the shark's eyes, or how the ocean turned red around me, and I wonder if I'm helping or just scaring people further from the water. But I keep going because silence feels worse. I'd be pretending it never happened, and if I pretend it never happened, I might lose the meaning in why I survived at all. Last month, a local marine biologist named Kara invited me to join her on a tagging mission, helping track bull sharks off the same coast where I nearly died. I hesitated so long I thought she'd withdraw the offer, because the thought of facing that same water made my stomach twist into knots. But she said something that stuck with me. Sometimes the only way to heal is to look the thing that hurt you right in the eye. So I went. I stood on the deck of her research boat, gripping the rails so hard my knuckles went white, sweat rolling down my back as the ocean sparkled like nothing bad had ever happened there. We tagged 2 big bull sharks that day, both gliding past the boat with silent grace, their eyes cold and empty, yet beautiful in their own ruthless way. I felt fear, yes, but also an unexpected surge of respect, as if the sea was offering me a truce. When one of the sharks surfaced near the boat, big and scarred, Kara swore it was the same animal that had attacked me, based on an old wound near its dorsal fin. I stared at it for a long time, my heart thundering in my chest, remembering how it felt to have my flesh caught in its teeth. But instead of hate, all I felt was a strange, heavy sadness, as though we were both just animals doing what we needed to survive. I whispered a quiet thank you under my breath, not for the attack, but for the way it ripped my world open and forced me to see how fragile and precious life really is. The shark hovered near the surface, its tail moving in lazy sweeps, then slipped back into the depths, leaving me trembling and speechless. Kara clapped me on the shoulder, her grin bright against the sun, and for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. It was like shaking hands with my own fear. Now every time I see the ocean, I feel 2 things at once, terror and wonder, coiling around each other like twin currents, pulling me towards something bigger than myself. I still limp, and sometimes the scars ache like old anchors pulling me backward, but I'm alive, and I know I was meant to be. My son sits on my lap some evenings, tracing the marks on my leg, his small fingers gentle, and I tell him stories of the sea, leaving out the worst parts for now. I remind him that the ocean is wild and merciless, but also beautiful beyond words, and that we're not separate from its rhythm, just another piece of its vast puzzle. I don't pretend I'm fearless. The fear is there, always waiting. But I've learned to breathe through it, to keep my eyes open even when the water seems too dark. Because sometimes the very thing that tried to kill you is the thing that teaches you how fiercely you want to live. That day, the ocean didn't just leave a scar on my body. It carved a truth into my soul.